I can't imagine who has the capacity to be this evil, to be this inhumane.
A brutal killing.
It was something I'd never seen in 36 years. The dismemberment was almost done surgically.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
Right away, it gets you thinking along the lines of a serial murderer.
If you looked at his eyes, you could tell that he was a psychopath.
Anybody that she had contact with that night could have killed her.
The truth will be revealed.
This was truly a whodunit.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Manchester, New Hampshire, a blue-collar former mill town threaded with waterways.
The Piscataqu River flows into the Merrimack River. The two do connect in almost the center of Manchester. There's homes along the river. There's an old railroad trestle that kids would use to jump off of and jump into the water in the summertime.
But one summer's day, something disturbing emerges from the depths.
Several swimmers were out there, and one in particular swam up to what he thought was a bag.
It was so out of place that this person decided to look at it.
He looked inside and thought what he saw was a body of a small child or an infant.
These people were just horrified.
Detective Lieutenant Mark Putney and Detective James Susi are immediately called to the scene.
All your adrenaline and everything just kicks in. And I flew over to the west side, to the Piscataqu River, expecting to find a baby inside of a bag. When I opened the bag, the first thing I saw was a torso of a woman.
Headless, armless, and no legs, face down at the time.
It was obvious to us that she had been dismembered. It was something I'd never seen in 36 years, and I've investigated probably over 50 homicides, so it was very disturbing.
Who could do something like this to another human being?
Things start running through your mind as to, what happened and who is this person.
Without the head, it becomes much more difficult to identify somebody because you don't have any dental records, you don't have any basis of comparison.
We knew we need to start conducting a search. The water, the trestle, the walkways, the marsh, the entire area, in hopes to find the remaining body parts.
You're obligated to search as much as you can for body parts. I mean, that brings closure to the family on one side, but also may provide evidence.
When we didn't find the rest of the body, we assumed that it happened at some other location and the body was dumped there. So now our crime scene really went citywide. We didn't have any idea where this happened.
An examination of the torso yields a key detail.
She had a tattoo on her right shoulder that had the first name of Mary.
They immediately cross-reference the name with the town's recently disappeared and get a hit.
Mary Stetson was reported missing that morning by her oldest daughter, Tamara.
and they came and picked us up, and we went down to the station. It was weird because I was sitting in the car and I seen a helicopter up in the sky and people heading over towards the water where we live. And I was like, oh my God, what's going on?
There's no delicate way to tell someone that their mother was dismembered. You have to just explain it. And yeah, it's something that you don't forget.
To find out it was my mother's torso. It's just disgusting. It made me sick. That's when my life changed,
It's a horrific crime. And to know that she had 5 children, it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. It's something that, will stay with me the rest of my life.
Mary Stetson was described as a wonderful mom, somebody who was a good provider.
My mother was working at a cable company. She would work 40, 50 hours a week. She was tall, long legs, just beautiful, inside and out.
Her oldest daughter, Kemera, gave information that her mother had gone out on the night of the 18th, and that since that night, her mother never returned home. She said that was very unusual. She was last seen at 5:45 on the 18th and discovered on the 20th.
Creating a timeline is critical to any police investigation. Without a timeline, it's often difficult, if not impossible, for police to create a suspect list, and it makes it almost impossible for murder to be solved.
From the moment she was killed into the moment she was disposed of was probably over a 24-hour period. We determined that the death probably occurred late on the 18th, early on the 19th.
Narrowing it down further will prove a challenge.
When finding a body in water, it can prove difficult in determining cause of death and time of death. Being submerged in water may accelerate the internal changes in the body and cause decomposition at an advanced rate than it would outside the water. You also may have fish plucking out the hair and taking pieces of skin off the body. You also may have artifact from motorboats. The propeller can make deep cuts in the body to make it look like there was stabbing or cutting before they died.
But the injuries to Mary's torso point to something far more deliberate.
The medical examiner of New Hampshire did an autopsy, and he was able to determine that she died of multiple stab wounds, I think 12 to be specific, to her chest cavity. That tells me that somebody was very angry, extremely upset, and determined to kill this person, that it wasn't something that was an accident or a random act.
It clearly seemed like it was a personal attack. Something, I think we would characterize as, vicious, evil.
The frenzy of that attack contrasts with what the killer does next.
The dismemberment was almost done surgically. The cuts were very clean, right through the flesh and right through the bone. It didn't look like it was done by, to me, an amateur.
What that says about the mindset of the person is that they have this willingness not only to kill, but to get up close and personal and chop somebody into little bits.
You're already looking for a certain type of person. It takes a lot of strength, even if you know what you're doing. So the person you look for is likely male. That could be someone in the medical profession. That could also be someone who is a butcher.
We were looking for someone who had the capacity and the knowledge to dispose of a body, to throw off investigators, to both the victim and the suspect, and also someone who was so completely evil and depraved that could do something like this to another human being. It gets you thinking along the lines of a serial murderer.
One of the first things we did in this case was reach out to other police departments to see if they had any similar crimes in other jurisdictions.
So we were looking for a similar pattern.
There were no other cases that matched this case.
Detectives shift the focus to Mary's relationships to locate anyone she had contact with prior to her murder.
Most murders are committed between people who know each other in one capacity or another, and I call them crimes of passion.
We really needed to uncover every corner and lift up every stone and specifically get into the details of her life and what she was about and who she socialized with.
They turn to Mary's 22-year-old daughter, Tamra.
My mother talked to my father, but he lived all the way in Louisiana.
Her ex-husband wasn't a suspect. It was a very friendly relationship.
But the family can point them to someone who connects directly to Mary's timeline.
On the 18th, in the afternoon, she was supposed to go out with a guy named Chris.
And he never showed, and she was ready to, go out and have a good time. My mother wasn't the type to wait around. She's like, it's my Sunday. Hey, I'm leaving. She left the house at 5:45 in a taxi cab.
Mary's date then shows up less than an hour after she leaves the house.
It was a very quick conversation. Is your mother here? Is Mary here? And she said no, she had left. And the person said okay and left.
This unknown person is not somebody that she frequents with or socializes with. It was somebody that was new.
Our focus at this point was trying to identify the date. We don't know what that relationship was like. We don't know what happened after they left, if they did meet up. We don't know if they went to his apartment or a hotel or anywhere. Potentially, there could have been some type of argument where it could turn violent.
Detectives looking for Mary Stetson's murderer have their first suspect, a man they know only as Chris.
The family provided us the description of the person that showed up at her home. He was a white male. He had blue eyes and blonde spiked hair, slender build. We brought in a forensic artist and sat down with her. She was able to provide us a sketch of who this person was.
So we take the composite sketch and we wanted to get this information out so that we could start generating tips.
When you're dealing with homicide, the media is your friend. As much as they want information from you to make the 6 o'clock news, you need them to also get messages out to your witnesses, maybe to your suspect.
But I just didn't like the fact that she was all over the place. Didn't sit well with me at all.
The composite sketch is widely distributed, but Mary's date does not come forward.
We had no one that jumped out at us and said that, you need to take a real hard look at this person. It was very disappointing because here's somebody that was knocking at Mary's door 2 days before she's discovered, and for the person not to come forward immediately was very concerning to us. This person seemed as if it just dropped off the face of the earth.
Police move on to examine the next stage in Mary's timeline.
Mary was picked up by a local cab from her Kimball Street address and was taken downtown to a local bar.
We conducted an in-depth interview with that driver, who who confirmed that he had dropped her off, and he in fact saw her leave the cab and walk towards the bar. Mary arrived at the bar at approximately 6 p.m. in the evening.
It's a popular joint on Lake Avenue.
That was my mother's spot. She loved it there.
We had gone in there with her picture. We showed it around to the different patrons that were there, to the bartender. We learned that Mary had some drinks. We learned that somebody saw her with someone.
You now have a connection to a person and your victim. And certainly the theory is that, during that interaction, something went wrong for whatever reason, and then it becomes violent, which certainly happens in relationships.
Detectives compare the man's description with the one they have for Chris.
Chris had short, blonde, spiked hair, blue eyes. This individual that was seen with Mary had brownish hair, was a little older, so that it didn't match. So now we're trying to establish who this person is that was with Mary, and we're also still trying to find out who Chris was.
It certainly is frustrating when the information that you're looking for that you think is taking you in one direction, and then suddenly you're getting different information that's making you hang a left and head in another direction.
They search for any detail that could help them identify Mary's killer.
We started to speak with people inside the bar, and they brought up this one point during the evening. There was a male party who was different than Chris, had apparently purchased this teddy bear from another individual.
And the person that was with Mary, he was trying to warm up to her and bought the teddy bear for $5 and gave it to Mary.
One of the things that stood out was this particular teddy bear only had one eye on it. Several people had indicated that they thought it was unusual. It was just another a piece of the puzzle that we were trying to put together.
The canvas also helps detectives hone in on the time of the murder.
Mary was seen leaving the bar sometime around 11 p.m. that night.
At that point, Mary's trail runs cold. Aiming to generate new leads, they look further back in her timeline.
The family told us earlier that day she had been to this market, which was in the neighborhood. And there was the store manager, Eddie, who worked inside this place.
I didn't care for Eddie. I thought he was very sketchy, weird. You know how you get vibes from certain people, and he was one of them.
Allegedly, this was no shopping trip.
One of her daughters had indicated that she had an issue with Eddie. Her daughter would work there part-time and stock some shelves, and that he had made an inappropriate comment to her, and that he may have inappropriately touched her.
My mother found out about it and was really, really livid.
It's a very volatile situation when someone has a revelation that their daughter has been possibly molested.
I wondered if he had something to do with her disappearance.
Did Mary go back to the store, confront Eddie, and Eddie became so upset, killed Mary?
An alleged confrontation between Mary Stetson and a store manager named Eddie sparks the interest of detectives.
Based on what Mary's daughter told us, we were concerned. Eddie could possibly be a suspect here. The detectives went there and they spoke to him. They tried to get an alibi from him, what he did that night, get a timeline.
He did say that Mary had been there on the 18th, and she did confront him about these allegations, and they had a discussion. He described it as a bit heated. He denied having anything take place. Everything was on the up and up, and eventually Mary left the store, according to him. Eddie had closed the store at 11 o'clock.
He said he left and gave another employee a ride home, and he went home.
To verify Eddie's claim, they questioned the man he says was in his vehicle that night.
Billy Johnson was another employee in the store. He was a bit of a transient, too. I believe he may have even stayed from time to time in the basement of that place.
Rather than providing clarity, Billy's statement confuses the picture even further.
He said when Mary had stopped in and he had asked her about what she was doing later, and she may have been a little flirtatious, she had suggested that she may stop back between 10 and 11.
We had known that Mary was kind of a social butterfly, so it wasn't really all that unusual for her to agree to go out on a date. But the contradiction that we faced was the fact that she went to the store to confront Eddie about these allegations of sexual assault against her daughter. And while she's there, during some time frame, she has interaction with Billy, and she agrees that she's gonna have some kind of date with him later on in the evening. It just, you know, it didn't add up, it didn't make much sense.
As they probe deeper, allegations surface that may explain the contradiction.
People in the neighborhood said that Billy was a daily alcohol consumer, and he'd have these spans of time that he couldn't remember or just didn't make sense. When you're talking to somebody like that, you don't know what they remember and what they don't remember.
Then, they discover something even more disturbing.
We found that Billy worked in a butcher shop and was familiar with the process. When you hear about what took place and you see the manner in which the death occurred, you put two and two together and you say to yourself, this guy certainly has the potential to be a good suspect.
With conflicting accounts of Mary's actions, police want to see exactly what happened in the store.
There was CCTV video, and the camera wasn't working that night.
That clearly did send up a flag that, you know, was it just coincidental? Was it on purpose? Did Eddie create a malfunction with these cameras to hide something from the police? Certainly there was a potential for a motive, for, you know, something bad happening. Either Eddie or Billy or both having the potential or even the capacity to do this crime and having the MO for our murderer. If we had more concrete evidence from this closed-circuit TV, if we've seen Mary arrive, I mean, that could really turn into something else. Unfortunately, we didn't have that evidence. So we have to work hard to corroborate their stories and see if they have any alibis that fit. We couldn't connect Mary to Eddie because his alibi was locked up by the fact that he closed the store and he was seen by his family in another location on the same time frame that Mary had been seen in the downtown area.
Billy was living with somebody at the time when we spoke to that person, and we were able to alibi him that he did come home and never went back out. That whole scenario of the camera not working, I think, was legitimate.
To be certain, detectives perform a search for physical evidence.
Eddie allowed the detectives the opportunity to search the store. Obviously, whoever committed this murder, there would be a crime scene. They went downstairs, they searched the cellar, they looked all over, and they couldn't find any evidence that suggested that Mary had been killed there.
As they rule out the market, Mary's date appears from nowhere.
Chris just walked into the police department. and said something to the effect of, "I think you guys are looking for me." And we interviewed him. That composite sketch was 100% accurate. You could put them up together, it was the same person. What was concerning to me was the fact that after this homicide was reported, it was all over the media. And the fact that that person didn't come forward, to us, that was very important.
We're wary when he walks in the station right away that he is somehow connected to this, that he has had ample time to dispose of critical evidence, that he's had time to think about the whole process, to think about a story, to think about an alibi. You go into this hoping you could poke holes in his story.
He couldn't really provide a real reason for not coming forward. He also didn't go to work the next day. I remember looking into that and saying, well, this is odd. He didn't come forward for a couple of weeks, so we pressed him hard.
Chris eventually told us that he didn't make the appointment when he was supposed to. He was late. By the time he got to her house, she had left.
Chris tells police he then joined friends at another bar across the street from where Mary was dropped off.
Both bars were similar, maybe 50 yards from one another.
We confirmed his alibi by speaking with the friends that he was with that night, who corroborated that information. And in fact, he was with them, so he couldn't possibly have been where she was.
He also provided us an alibi as to where he spent the night that night, and we were able to find the person that he spent the night with. He was cleared as a suspect.
Knowing that he was a focus, a critical focus of this investigation, it is discouraging when you think you're angling for the right piece of the pie, and then suddenly, you know, you get that ripped out from underneath you and you realize, you know, you have to regroup and go in a different direction. I mean, people were on edge. They talked about it in the schools and on the news, and it didn't matter if we were exhausted. It didn't matter if we had other things on our plate. But it became increasingly frustrating. The more information that we got, the more of kind of a question we had in the back of our heads as to who this suspect was. Were we ever going to get to the right person? Were we going to locate that person in time to prevent maybe another tragedy?
Chris then turns from suspect to critical witness.
Chris had seen Mary walking down Lake Avenue with another gentleman. Long, dark hair, kind of a chiseled complexion, in his 40s. And he remembers because Mary was wearing the hat that he recognized, the dark, wide-brimmed hat.
This matches the description of the man seen with Mary earlier that evening. More determined than ever, detectives renew their efforts with the media.
You never get tired of tips, especially on a whodunit. And this was truly a whodunit.
They get a break. A caller claims Mary was hanging out with a guy known only as Razor.
He told us that Razor would use a knife. And he was very skilled with it.
Police have a new person of interest. A man who goes by the name Razor.
Kind of ironic that he got the nickname of Razor and that he came in on a tip line when we're looking for somebody that had been involved in a dismemberment.
They bring in the man who phoned in the tip. His name is Josh.
Josh had told us that there was a party that both he and Razor were at. Both were competing for, you know, Mary's affection, and at some point, she was obviously leaning towards Josh more so than she was leaning towards Razor, if at all. Razor was apparently so upset that he located him that next day and assaulted and beat him up.
Detectives need to determine if Razor is the same dark-haired man last seen with Mary the night she died.
He was upset and had a connection to Mary. Mary kind of had an attraction to his friend instead of him. Maybe he has a criminal past. Those things just kind of add up.
They head to Razor's last known location.
When he was in Concord, he was living in this tent on the river. I personally actually went to Concord and found his tent. We searched his campsite and surrounding areas, and we didn't find anything. No knives. No knives that were capable of causing this homicide.
This manner of disposing of a body, it seemed like it was a process, a very involved process, and that didn't fit his profile. He was a drifter, a transient who lived in a tent, doesn't have a vehicle, doesn't have the equipment needed. He doesn't have the means in order to commit this type of crime. In the end, he didn't fit the description of the person back in the bar.
With Razor ruled out, concern grows the case may go cold.
That was extremely frustrating because each time we developed information on another person, we were excited, we were getting there, we identified somebody, could this be it? And then suddenly we would speak to these individuals and we realized right away this is not the person we're looking for.
Months are going by, and we couldn't lay her to rest.
It's gut-wrenching. You know, when you're trying to solve this case, there's pressure from the family. They want answers, you know, so you have an obligation to try to solve it as quick as you can and give them answers. We used every avenue that we could to hopefully try to solve it.
Then, they uncover a curious new lead. A second missing persons report.
We received a call late at night from a woman who identified herself as Donna Plick.
She hadn't seen her ex-husband, Vaclav Plick. Even though they were divorced, they still had a relationship where they would talk daily. Donna was somewhat nervous, but she was also concerned. She didn't know if something had happened to him.
Vaclav Plick was last seen in the early hours of July 22nd, 2 days after police found Mary Stetson.
When someone disappeared in and around the time of the murder or shortly thereafter, that is of great interest to find out where they went.
But what detectives learn next turns Vaclav from victim into potential suspect.
Vaclav was employed at a place nearby. It was described as a deboning factory.
He would debone chickens. He would cut up lamb legs and beef. And he would use a knife. And he was very skilled with it.
He was certainly capable of making the type of cuts that we had seen on the torso when we first discovered the body. Very clean, very precise cuts.
When Donna was interviewed, she indicated that he had a violent past. He had threatened that he could kill her and cut her up, and no one would ever know. Donna knew that he would frequent bars that were on Lake Ave, and that he would go fishing where the body was found.
Donna gives police a photo of her ex-husband.
One of our detectives that had originally gone out to these two drinking establishments and was asking around saw his photograph. And he was like, "You gotta be kidding me."
He had been inside the bar showing the picture of Mary Stetson around to see if anybody else had known Mary. And in fact, he had gone over to a table of males that were sitting together, and it showed the picture. They didn't speak very good English, but they could communicate that they had never seen that woman before. The third male that was sitting there happened to be Vaclav Plick.
With Plick now the prime suspect, detectives return to the bar where Mary was last seen.
we completed a photo array, which included Vaclav. You know, our hope is to have somebody identify him in the bar.
We showed it around to the different patrons that were there, to the bartender, and they identified Vaclav Plick.
They need to determine what happened in the hours after Mary and Plick left the bar.
Well, we started canvassing the neighborhood where Donna showed us this apartment. And there was a neighbor that we spoke to that knew Vaclav.
She had seen Vaclav arrive at the apartment with a female who was similar in description to Mary on the night she disappeared. So when we initially came to the apartment, two of us entered through the common hallway in the front. One of the first things we saw was what appeared to be dark stains on the wall, leaving the front of the apartment outside the common hallway and heading towards the exterior door. The stains that we tested did test positive for the presence of human blood.
That gave us probable cause to get a search warrant. It was very interesting what we found in that apartment. When you first go in and just look, you wouldn't think that anything had happened there. Everything appeared normal.
And then as we looked in further, we determined that there was evidence that not only pointed to this Vaclav Plick as our guy, our suspect, but connected him right away to our victim.
On the bed was a rimmed hat. That's Mary's hat.
Not only that, there were several teddy bears inside that apartment. One in particular that was missing an eye.
All crime scenes are strange, but to see the hat sitting on a bed that was perfectly made, and to see this teddy bear without an eye was just, you know, here's the case.
Kind of made the hair on the back of your neck stand up.
Detectives have proof that Mary Stetson was inside Vaclav Plick's apartment the night she disappeared. Now they're looking for evidence of murder.
In his bedroom, the carpet was cut out.
I mean, that's consistent with something happening, something staining the carpet, and then the carpet having to be removed right away.
When someone's stabbing somebody, the blood is casting off.
And clearly, people who clean up crime scenes forget the fact that there's other manners in which to collect evidence or visually see evidence.
You turn out all the lights, and you spray this chemical, Luminol, and it luminesces blood with like a black light, and that area lit up like a Christmas tree. There was blood on the bedspread. There was blood on the heater leading to the hallway. You could see there was an enormous amount of blood that was there. There was blood in the bathtub. At the last phase, it kind of tells you a story. This is where he cut her up in the bathroom. You understand the human cost of what that means, but as an investigator, it's another little piece of evidence, because at the end of the day, you're trying to convict this person and put him away for the rest of his life.
After a nationwide manhunt, they ambush Vaclav Plick outside a gas station in Austin, Texas.
We didn't know if he was armed. We knew certainly what he was capable of. So we waited outside, and I pretended I was pumping gas. And as he walked out, we grabbed him and arrested him.
I was so happy and relieved because this man was caught, and he wouldn't be able to do it again to some other woman.
As they grill Plick for a confession, they now have a complete timeline of what happened the night Mary died.
Mary left her apartment about 5:45. She traveled in a cab to a local bar. There, she met with Vaclav. They had some drinks at this bar, and he purchased a teddy bear for her. They then left that bar and headed back towards Vaclav's apartment on Orange Street. And that he tried maybe having sex with her, and she didn't want to. And an argument ensued, and he ended up violently stabbing her to death. In a panic, he didn't know what to do, so he dismembered her so he could get her out of the apartment. He used a miter saw that was in his closet, and he put the torso in a large duffel bag, and he threw her in the area that he fished at the trestle. He then took the other body parts and drove out to the total opposite side of the city and discarded them in the woods.
I had an opportunity to be very close to this person, this level of evil that I don't think I've ever been as close to in the past.
With the information that he provided about what he had done with the torso and the body parts, Manchester police conducted another search, and we were able to find her head on one side of the street and some of her extremities on the other. I think it was very important to the family that we recovered her head especially. They were able to give her a proper burial, and I think that was very, very important.
She raised us, and he took that away. He just completely destroyed a family.
On November 14th, 2000, Vaclav Plick is convicted of Mary Stetson's murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole.
I just remember when the verdict came back guilty, how emotional it was, even for me. And I turned, and Tamara was there, and we embraced each other and cried.
It was a relief. I gave Mark a big hug because they worked hard. And it was finally ended. And I was, I was kind of happy. Justice was served.
It was so callous, like she was an animal, just murdered in cold blood.
A brutal killing.
We were all floored. She was very beautiful, just a sweetheart of a person.
A dark mystery with multiple suspects.
I mean, this guy matches so many people in Houston.
His close relationship with her would have provided for opportunity. You have the woman scorned. She started acting crazy.
Here's a man that just killed his girlfriend. He's telling us this.
The truth will be revealed.
We asked him, do you have any idea who may want to harm Jennifer Lewis? And without hesitation, he said yes.
Every day in North America, dozens of people are murdered. The key to solving the toughest of these homicides lies in the final 24 hours of the victim's life. To crack the case, detectives must reconstruct that critical timeline. The minutes and hours containing evidence that can help unlock the mystery and catch the killer. Houston, Texas, the southern metropolis, home to 2.3 million.
Houston is a fine city. I love it. Lots of good people here. But it's one of the largest cities in the United States. And so you're gonna find, crime.
There is no community that I'm aware of that all good people are in. It just doesn't happen. And some of these cases are really horrifying.
Even for experienced detectives, some murders stand out.
We had a young female walking along with a friend from a parking lot to the front door of Houston Community College for Health Professions. And all of a sudden, she is shot in the back.
The victim is 27-year-old nursing student Jennifer Lewis.
By the time homicide investigators got there, Miss Lewis had been transported to the hospital.
She was dead on arrival.
Homicide investigator Clarence Douglas begins the search for her killer.
Jennifer's case was one of those horrible cases. Why would someone want to shoot this young woman that's going to a nursing school to be an RN?
We were 6 weeks from graduation. Going around innocently in life, thinking nothing like this will happen to me. Jennifer and I met as nursing students. It was an automatic chemistry. We would study together. We would talk about these transitional issues of 20-year-old women, boyfriends, and dreams and hopes. Jennifer was energy in a human being. She was just like a magnet.
Here you had a woman that was innocent, totally innocent. And then all of a sudden, this tragic event takes place.
Investigators begin the task of tracing the last 24 hours of Jennifer's young life, starting with the shooting itself.
We knew that we had a witness, Cheryl Allen, that was walking right beside Jennifer.
That day we drove up to school. We parked in our normal spot, hopped out. The day was bright. There was lots of people, school buses. We had our arms intertwined, and we both heard this loud blast. I said to her, "Did you hear that car backfire?" There was seconds of a pause, and she says, "No, I've been shot." And when she said that, her body immediately got limp, very heavy, and she couldn't take any more steps. So I laid her down, and everything slowed down. It was a very beautiful day in the midst of an extremely tragic scene.
From all appearances, Jennifer did not know the shooter, because when she was shot, she said, "That man shot me." She didn't call out a name or anything. At At that point, Cheryl could see the blood coming out of her chest there, the front of her chest. Cheryl was trying to help Jennifer.
I said to the teacher that was doing CPR, "Stop, she's dead." When I looked in her eyes, I just already knew she was present with the Lord. I did see a figure running away from the corner of my left eye.
But she couldn't really get a good look at him because she was trying to assist Jennifer. We have witnesses that heard the gunshot and then saw the shooter run away. Told us he wasn't afraid to be seen. All the witnesses agree that it was a thin black male. They agreed that he had a dark hat on his head. It's not that he walked with a limp or he had one arm. I mean, this guy matches so many people in Houston.
Witness accounts do yield a key detail.
After the shooting, he ran and got into a red car. And as the red car sped off.
We weren't close enough to see who was in the car. They could only see a silhouette of the driver. At this point, everybody's a suspect. Everybody.
Detective Douglas turns his attention to the crime scene.
Containing the crime scene is very difficult because the containment starts when the first officer arrives on the scene. Things that happened prior to his arrival, we can't control that. Things like the nurses, instructors that came out to give Jennifer CPR and tried to keep her breathing.
When a crime scene has been altered, either because of resuscitative efforts or because she was shot while she was in this crowd, it makes the crime scene workup much more challenging.
One of the things that you look for at a shooting scene is firearms evidence. We didn't find any spent shell at the scene. So we believed that it would be a revolver, not a semi-automatic weapon. But also, there was no bullet. It went from her back through her chest. It came out right below the neckline here. You couldn't find the bullet because there was so much going on at the scene. But from the size of the exit wound and the travel of the bullet from the back to front, the estimate was that it was a .38 caliber handgun.
Homicide investigators found her cell phone. She was carrying a lunch with her, and that was found there. When you don't have direct evidence to connect to a suspect, it can be very challenging for homicide investigators to develop leads because it is a real whodunit.
There is one conclusion they can draw.
There was no confrontation at all with the shooter. No words spoken. The person with Jennifer was not harmed. This was a hit on Jennifer alone. Somebody hated her. So we had the challenge of finding out who that hater was. To try to solve a case like that in a huge city the size of Houston, we knew it was going to be difficult. So you got to go figure out who does she associate with, who is her friends, who is her enemies.
Cheryl gives detectives insight into Jennifer's timeline.
Every day, I would pick her up before school started. School started in the afternoon, something like 5. And her home was in the direction of the school, so it was nothing for me to go by there. That day, she needed me to drop her boyfriend off at home.
Melvin Reed was an associate minister at a church in Houston. And he had a good job as a postal worker. He met Miss Jennifer Lewis at church, and things took off from there. She was going to marry Mr. Reed.
Cheryl told us that she picked Jennifer and Melvin up, and they drove Melvin to his apartment. Then Cheryl drove her straight to the parking lot of the school.
So he's on the timeline, very close on the timeline, and he would know her daily routine. He knew how she traveled, and he knew that she would be going to school on certain days and at certain hours.
It's often standard to investigate the spouse or partner of a victim for a number of reasons. Primarily is because that person may be the one responsible for the murder. They may have hired someone to commit the murder, and police have to pursue that. They have to go down that avenue and see if that person has any sort of direct or indirect involvement in the crime.
Detectives discover Melvin recently filed a police report that his gun has gone missing.
It was suspicious. It could be, you're dealing also with human emotions. So they needed to take a closer look at his relationship with her.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jennifer Lewis have identified their first person of interest, her boyfriend, Melvin Reed.
What you do in that case, you talk with him and you ask him questions. Did you have anything to do with her getting shot? She just left your place. Have you had any arguments with her?
Police asked Melvin for his account of what happened in the hours before the murder.
You said they read the Bible. Jennifer got ready for school. Cheryl picked them up. And they drove Melvin to his apartment. Jennifer waited for Melvin to run upstairs and get his cell phone and bring it back to her. They embraced one another, kissed. Cheryl and Jennifer drove off.
Melvin denies any knowledge of a red getaway vehicle and says he had no means of getting to campus.
Either he didn't have a car or his car was in the shop being repaired.
He said that when the shooting happened, he had just been dropped off, and he received a call from a relative of Jennifer telling him that Jennifer had been shot. There was very, very few cell phones at that time. So they called him at his landline, and he was home.
Police need to determine if Melvin had enough time to commit the murder.
Melvin's house back to campus was maybe 10 minutes.
We didn't think that he could follow them, shoot Jennifer, and run back to the house that quickly. And the gun that he had didn't really match. It's a .380 semi-automatic, not a revolver. Melvin was upset. He couldn't believe that this had happened to Jennifer. There was really no reason at that point to think that Melvin was actually involved. But we also had to look at other people that he may have been involved with or knew. When we asked him the question, do you have any idea who may want to harm Jennifer Lewis? Without hesitation, Melvin said yes. My ex-girlfriend, Sheila Dillard. She and I have a son together, but we've been separated for about a year. When he said that, it gets your attention. Why would he say that about his ex-girlfriend, the mother of his child?
The police will always look at family members to see who has an axe to grind. And it's usually pretty easy to find out because if you don't like a family member, then those feelings aren't usually secrets.
What happened was Melvin and Sheila had broken off their relationship. But because they had a son together, they would see one another. Sheila still looked at him as her man.
Melvin recounts a specific incident from months before.
On one particular day, Melvin had his son, who he calls Little Melvin. He tells Sheila, when you come to pick up little Melvin, call me. But instead of Sheila calling, when she got to the apartment, she went upstairs. She saw Jennifer. Melvin introduced her to Jennifer. It's my girlfriend. From that day, Sheila began to call him repeatedly. And then just before Valentine's Day, a few weeks before the murder, Sheila's over at Melvin's, and he tells her, I'm gonna ask Jennifer to marry me. Sheila was hysterical. She went into his apartment and she took a photograph that he had on his dresser there of Jennifer. And she ripped it apart.
Melvin reveals another key detail about the day of the murder.
That day, Jennifer told Melvin that she had received some telephone calls where the person would just hang up. Nobody was on the phone.
Those calls came between 2:30 and 5.
He suspected it was Sheila. But if Sheila Dillard had anything to do with Jennifer's death, she hired someone to do it. Because all the witnesses identified the shooter as a young black man.
So after talking to Melvin, you have to talk to Sheila. And that was the next step that we did in this investigation. She agreed to come down to the Homicide Division. We talked to Sheila extensively. Her alibi was I was at home fixing my mother's hair.
Detectives need to confirm her alibi with her mother.
The mother was an angry person.
Police went to Sheila's mother's house and there was a big argument.
When people prevent you from doing your job, that's borderline obstructionist. But it's rare for the police, even with all the lying that goes on, to charge people. Because if you start charging people for lying to you, then you may have people who will not cooperate with you down the road.
We still had to get more information on Sheila. So we asked her if she would take a polygraph test.
Guilty people sometimes put themselves forward and willingly offer to do a lie detector test or polygraph. And the reason they do this is because they're basically saying, look, I'm innocent, I didn't do it. And I'm willing to do this test as a means of covering for themselves.
She admitted that, yeah, I was upset. Melvin hurt me. And she said she wanted to go back with Melvin. That was her child's father, and she wanted to be with him. We asked her, did you shoot Jennifer Lewis? Do you know who shot Jennifer Lewis? Were you there when Jennifer Lewis was shot and killed? All those questions were asked, and she passed all those questions according to the examiner, showing that she was not involved. We knew Sheila didn't shoot her, but we believed She somehow had some kind of connection, and we still had to figure out what that was. We wanted more direct information that would try to connect her to that red car, to the shooter. Sheila had a small Ford, and it was kind of a goldish color. And she denied having anything to do with the red car. So we called a special unit that's attached to Houston Police Department and asked them if they would do surveillance for us.
As they do so, detectives receive a new lead.
Another officer that worked the street in uniform called us and said, you need to look at Jennifer's ex-boyfriend. His name is John Johnson.
I remember her talking about him a lot. It was months before Melvin. I don't know quite how to define the relationship, but they were extremely fond of each other. She talked about him all the time. They did a lot of writing. She never talked about any specifics.
They discovered that Johnson murdered his girlfriend, a woman named Paula Hunter.
Now, here's a man that just killed his girlfriend. We just wanted to get his side of the story as far as he and Jennifer was concerned. How did she fit into that murder?
Detectives follow up on Jennifer Lewis's ex-boyfriend, currently in jail for murder.
John Johnson had a girlfriend named Paula. He was also seeing Jennifer. One night, Jennifer spent the night with Johnson. Johnson gets up, takes Jennifer's car keys, and drives to his girlfriend Paula's. Ended up shooting and killing Paula. As he leaves, one of the witnesses writes down the license plate number. They put the license plate number on the police radio that came back to Jennifer Lewis on Daphne Street. The police go to Daphne Street and they question Jennifer about her car being at a murder scene. She tells the police she don't know anything about it because she didn't realize that he had taken her car. She talked John into, look, turn yourself in for what you've done. John turned himself in, and he was put in Harris County Jail where he was awaiting trial.
If Johnson knew that she would testify against him and provide damaging testimony to him, you would think that he probably would want to eliminate her, you know?
We learned that prior to his murder case, there was a civil case that John had received a $9,000 payment. Of course, we looked at that as a possibility that he could use this money maybe to harm Jennifer.
It's relatively common that a person in jail recruits somebody else to commit crimes on the outside. If you serve time in a federal penitentiary where other people around you are in there for violent crimes, it's easier than you might think to find somebody who's willing to kill somebody else for $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000.
Detective Douglas pays Johnson a visit.
In the interview with John, John acknowledged, yeah, I did get that money. It was a civil case that I was involved in, and I gave the money to my mother.
Douglas probes into the pair's relationship.
John Johnson confirmed that he had been involved with Jennifer Lewis.
She would visit him every Tuesday and Friday. They also wrote letters back and forth. Now, here's a man that just killed his girlfriend. He's telling us this. I would never harm Jennifer. Jennifer was special.
Johnson shows police the letters she sent to his jail cell as evidence he's telling the truth.
He had no animosity toward Jennifer. There wasn't any ill feelings for him being in jail.
They find no evidence of a hired hit that would place him on the timeline.
They just could not make a direct connection between John Johnson and the murder of Jennifer Lewis.
You feel frustrated, but we still had a lot of work to do. Somewhere there's some connection from Jennifer to the person that shot her. What we have to do is to, through Jennifer's connections, put that person back at the scene shooting Jennifer.
As Douglas continues to probe, he gets a call from the surveillance team watching Sheila Dillard.
They watch people walking back and forth, people going up to the apartment and coming down. Then they see a small red vehicle pull in. They see the vehicle pick up 3 females. Take those females to a parking lot of a store. Sheila gets out of the car. The driver looks like a thin black male wearing a cap.
They knew that a red car was involved. Now they could connect the red car to Sheila Dillard.
Police surveillance has identified the potential getaway vehicle seen on the day of Jennifer's murder.
They got a license plate number. And that license plate number registered to a Broderick Franklin.
We ran Broderick through the national database. We found the location of where he lived with his mother. She said he doesn't live here anymore. I don't know where he is, but when he calls me, I'll tell him that you all want to talk to him. Wasn't long that Broderick did call us. Said, I heard you're looking for me, something about some murder or something, I don't know nothing about it. Well, we asked him if he'd come down and talk with us. Eventually he did come down. And he said, I don't know a Sheila. So, well, you dropped her off at her apartment on this day, at this time. You showed him a picture, I don't know her. Well, you picked up 3 females. Oh yeah, I remember that. I took them around the corner. But I don't know no Sheila, and I don't know nothing about no murder.
Broderick says he was nowhere near Jennifer's college on the afternoon of the shooting.
So we asked him if you'd take a polygraph. Because your car, we believe that car was involved in the murder. He said, sure, I'd take a polygraph. He takes the polygraph, he passes. We said, okay, well, look, we need to examine your car. Would you allow us to do that? He said, well, that's gonna be a problem. Well, why is that a problem? Well, the car was burned up. What do you mean it was burned up? On May 8th, the car caught a fire down on Main. It burned up. We followed that lead. We went to a junkyard where the car was taken to, only to find out the car had been cut up into pieces. We couldn't examine the car to see if it would lead us back to the murder itself.
They had nothing to go on at this point. I mean, they had no evidence to tie him to the scene. So they was back to square one.
So what do? You continue to work, you continue to look at your case. You cannot harass the suspects, you can't harass the witnesses. So you have to wait.
The months after Jennifer's murder, you're not the same. Nothing's the same. I would stop by from time to time to see her family. My father would call the police station just as much as her father would, wanting to know what happened, because we all did not know why, who. Was it random? So you have all of these questions. I remember being angry. How this could have happened, not a clue. And I just can remember being really so naive, not to think that that type of evil would cross your path.
These cases are not easy. When you get working in homicide, you know right away that your responsibility is first to the victim and to the victim's family and to the rest of the community. The families always want clarity. I felt frustrated, but I never lost faith. You just have to do your job and try not to leave any stone unturned.
13 months after the murder of Jennifer Lewis, investigator Douglas receives an unusual call.
Patrick Curry was a jail inmate at Harris County Jail. He talked to a deputy, told him that he had information regarding the girl that got killed about a year ago at the school. And he wanted to talk to the homicide detectives. You have to be suspicious, but you have to also interview that person and find out what it is they want to tell you.
A jailhouse informant is the lowest of the low. You cannot trust a single word they say unless it can be corroborated by external pieces of evidence. The simple reason is, if you're in jail, you'll do whatever you can to get out of there earlier.
He was, very calm. He said that a couple of days or a day after the girl got shot, he said Sheila came to their house. And Sheila tell her friend, Samara, come here, I want to talk to you. They went into the bedroom. He said he listened at the door.
He and Sheila Dillon and his friend talking about the death of Jennifer Lewis.
Patrick Curry said you need to talk to his friend, Samara Dobbins. He believed that she knew what was going on, she knew what had happened. That was really like a bell going off. Wait a minute. Samara is a young lady that I knew from working in uniform.
Douglas's knowledge stems from Samara's long history of drug abuse.
A homicide investigator went to visit Samara at the rehab facility.
I decided, since I knew her so well, that I would not interview her. I wanted someone else to interview her to see what she would say. What you're looking for in that interview is something that Samara can tell us about the murder that we don't know, that has not been on the television, that has not been printed in the news media, that has not been on the radio. We learned that Samara had been staying with Sheila for a while. She said that the day that Jennifer was killed, she was watching little Melvin. She said Sheila left in the morning, driving her car. Sheila came back late in her little red car.
This blows a hole in Sheila's alibi and clearly links her to a car similar to the one used in the murder.
Sheila was very upset. She was pacing back and forth. Sheila told her, she said, I got that bitch.
Detectives honing in on murder suspect Sheila Dillard have found a witness who can break apart her story.
Sheila tells Samara what had happened. Samara was friends with Sheila's brother, Daryl Dillard. The day before, Sheila had gone to the crack house where Daryl was selling drugs. At the crack house that day, Daryl introduced Sheila to a man they call a hitman, Gary Chop.
Here, Sheila made the deal that would seal the fate of Jennifer Lewis.
Sheila paid Daryl $700. Daryl was going to get $400. Chop was going to get $300.
It was so cold-blooded and callous. The amount of money that was exchanged between the mastermind and the hitman were ridiculously low.
Samara provides the final pieces of the puzzle, explaining what happened as Jennifer's timeline wound down to zero.
Sheila had written down Jennifer's address from a letter that she had seen in Melvin's apartment. She knew the phone number. Sheila and Chop decided to call the house and see if Jennifer was there. Jennifer comes to the phone, and they hung the phone up. They drove over to Daphne Street where they parked, and they watched the house. The red car belonged to Daryl's girlfriend.
Cheryl shows up. Jennifer and Melvin gets in the car, and they drives off.
So they followed Jennifer to Melvin's apartment. And they watched Melvin get out of the back seat. Jennifer and Melvin hugged each other and kissed. Jennifer gets back into the car. They drive off to the school. So they follow them. She said that she told Chop, there she go, can you get her? So Chop said, yeah, I can get her. Chop got out and he walked in the parking lot. He shot her. Chop came running back. He jumps in the car and he tells her, go, go, go.
Sheila's brother Daryl then disposes of the gun.
And Daryl throws it into the bayou. I tried to get the dive team to locate the gun, but the gun was never found.
Samara says that Sheila claims to have passed her polygraph by mixing anxiety medication with beer.
It's possible with the spectrum of therapeutic drugs out there that there can be a medication that could reduce the anxiety and therefore allowing somebody to pass it even though they're not being truthful. Another possibility here is that she passed the polygraph test because she's a pathological liar.
Police now have everything they need.
They got an arrest warrant for Sheila Dillard, her brother Dale Dillard, and Gary Lane Chop.
Sheila was found in Melvin's bed when we arrested her. The fact that Melvin said over and over that he was going to marry Jennifer, and to learn later, started a sexual relationship again with Sheila. That was very upsetting. We secured confessions from Sheila and Chop. The only reason that Sheila could give was that it's her jealous rage. She wanted Melvin, and she was going to do anything to get him.
Sheila Dillard figured by having Jennifer Lewis murdered, she could continue to be with Melvin Reed. In the end, she lost because she went to prison. Sheila Dillard pled guilty to murder. She was given 50 years. Gary Lane Chop pled for life in prison. Dale Dillard, her brother, he went to trial. He was found guilty of tampering with evidence, and he was given 20 years in prison. Jennifer, her life was so precious and ended, all because a woman could not accept the fact that her lover had decided to move on.
Several days before Jennifer and I were driving somewhere carrying on our 20-year-old shenanigans, and she said to me, if I died, Cheryl, today or tomorrow, it'll be okay. And I said, why would you say something like that? She says, I know that heaven is my home, and it'll be okay. And I didn't know that she was speaking to me then. About today. And she needed me to know that she was going to be okay.